This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Amanda Whitcroft. Amanda, thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
So you told me just a minute ago where you are right now, and just to make the rest of us jealous.
Sure, New York is having its first snowstorm, and I'm in Cancun, Mexico.
Yeah, what a way to start! New York is there, and I'm not there. That's right.
Exactly.
Snowing in New York, and I'm not there. So tell us a little bit about who Amanda Whitcroft is.
Amanda Wicker. So I'm originally from about an hour and a half upstate New York. Campbell Hall, New York is the name of the town. I don't know if you know where the Woodbury Commons is, the big outlet mall. I'm about 15 minutes from there. It's where I grew up. And I went to college in Long Island, New York, Adelphi University. And I currently live in Jersey City, New Jersey.
So upstate, is that like up in the Adirondacks, or not quite that far?
No, not that far. I'm trying to think of another town you would know. It's about an hour south of Poughkeepsie, if you know
Okay.
where Poughkeepsie
Yep.
is. Yeah. Very pretty town. Very a lot of farms, cows, horses, so you're forced to kind of develop a personality because you're not next to much.
Well, my wife and I actually spent our honeymoon on the other side of Lake Champlain in Burlington, so or just
Oh,
north of Burlington. So I love New England.
that's very pretty. We're nowhere near that.
That's a little further north. That's right.
Well, exactly.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and kind of give me your elevator pitch. If you and I walk on an elevator, we're going up 10 floors. Tell us what exactly you're doing right now.
Sure. So, Panda PR I created almost a year ago, come February 2019 will be a year. And, it was, to be quite honest, an accident. I came from the entertainment production background. I started at the talent agency. I worked at ICM in Los Angeles. I moved out to Los Angeles right
Hmm.
after college, and I started in the talent agency in the mailroom. I worked my way up to a desk. I worked for the famous director Luc Besson. I started as his assistant. I became his creative executive. And the last film I worked on with him was Valerian with Cara Delevingne
Yeah.
and Dane DeHaan. And I was with him for about 4.5 years. And so I was very heavily involved in that world. I was on my way to becoming a film producer.
Hmm.
And I moved back to New York because of family reasons. And when I moved back to New York, I got involved in talent management where I was working with actors. So I was always good at kind of connecting the puzzle pieces and knowing because actors are essentially brands, and I
Sure.
knew what went well with what. And kind of every actor was so different that I knew how to, and being an actor myself
Hmm.
originally, I knew how to kind of place and what to do for each actor because they're so different according to their personality. And but I realized that I didn't want to be working with actors necessarily,
Hmm.
but actual, brands that were more of a product base.
Right.
But I didn't realize that originally. So it was an accident. And I say that because I had some friends who had, boutique businesses of which I helped them secure press and get them exposure with influencer marketing and how relevant that's become.
Right.
And they were the friends that told me, Amanda, you should be doing this for a living. And so that's how Panda PR kind of became what it is today.
So is the Panda because you were called Amanda Panda or something like that when you were little, or?
That's exactly it. I wanted to do A and W, my initials, but I was told that that sounded too much like the root beer,
Yeah, I was
so I
going to
went
say the root beer
for
already took that, so yeah.
right. So I went for the panda.
I love the name. So you kind of stepped into this. You said you used to be an actor, so you were telling me just a little story about that off air. So you want to kind of circle back and tell us the story of the Gotham scene?
The Gotham, honestly, Gotham, I attribute to the director T.J. Scott, who's also a friend, who was kind enough to get me that role on the TV. I said, "Hey, can I audition for anything?" And he said, "Come in, come in an audition." He didn't give me any guarantee of booking anything. He just said, "Come and audition, and we'll see what happens." And I auditioned, and he texted me and said, "You were the best audition." Um, you got the role. And that was that. And so that was also just a big accident.
No.
So, but I did that, and that was probably the first speaking role I had in TV.
So the scene that we were talking about specifically about the table, can you touch on that just a little bit?
What do you want me to say?
Well, so sadly your character was killed off.
She was.
So what happened? What happened during that scene?
The Mad Hatter was basically, he was recreating his sister, Alice in Wonderland, and I was a stranger to him, but because he was so neurotic about recreating his sister, he dressed me up being a total stranger and killed me because he was a psychopath, to say the least. And that was the end of my character.
And the dying scene, I mean, there was a stuntman that kind of left something out that he was supposed to put in
Oh,
this
well,
scene.
that's right. So the first time we filmed, they forgot to put the padding underneath the tablecloth and my head. And in that scene, you will hear the thump of which was my head actually hitting that table. And they, after a couple of takes, they then put the padding down, of which you didn't hear the thump, but they were still good takes. And after all of that, the editor said, I think the first one was the best take. And I said, yeah, you think? Because my head actually hit the table.
Said, "You see this bruise right here on my forehead?
Yeah,
That's
no,
real
look,
life."
I got a scar. No.
Well, we'll make sure in the show notes we'll have a link to that scene just
Oh,
specifically,
great.
so
Yeah,
people
do
can
PR with me. I hit my head on the table.
absolutely.
Head first.
So when did the Panda marketing come? When did that really start?
It will be a year ago come February, 2019.
So was there like a moment that you realized, okay, I can either continue to pursue acting or I need to kind of branch out, or what was kind of that moment that you said, hey, I need to do this versus this. So what
I'm
caused that shift?
The shift is I think you start to see, for me anyway, I started to see a future, with my significant other,
Hmm.
and you start to want things that, acting can be so up and down
Sure.
and not stable. And I wanted something more stable, and I also had the skill set to do that. And it was a little more rewarding to be able to do that because I had that skill set.
Hmm.
So I took that and I ran with it.
So from say a year and a half ago till today, what's been kind of the growth curve that you've seen? I mean, has it been up and down? Has it been a pretty steady incline? How would you describe the last 18 months?
Oh, completely up and down. And I think anybody in their first year, if they didn't tell you that, would be lying. It's completely up and down. And especially at the beginning, I mean, I would be on a complete high and then the next month have no clients.
Mm,
And it's just because some startups that I would work with had funding at a certain time and they would lose it,
sure.
or they knew, or we both kind of knew that it was for a certain period of time and that was it. So in that case, and I have a friend who has a very successful PR firm, and to
Mhm.
this day she tells me it's so up and down. And
Yeah.
I think no matter first year or 10 years in, I think it's constantly shifting.
Do you specialize in any specific type of PR? Is it digital? I mean, are there any other, say, branches in marketing that you kind of reach into as well? Do you work on SEO? Do you work on, I mean, you said you kind of mentioned influencer branding. So what else do you, or influencer marketing, what else are you looking at or are you specializing in?
So I do, I mean, we do everything, my team. We do press, we do hard copy press, digital press, influencer marketing, like you mentioned. We
Hmm.
do cross-pollination. We do, you know, I mean, just everything from digital to hard copy, across all channels, social media marketing, Twitter, Facebook,
Right.
Instagram. So those are your four kind of huge, and those are the, big hits with
Sure.
everyone that needs PR and marketing.
Right.
And then there are now so many different angles of how you can approach PR and marketing. So it really ranges according to client. I mean, I have a client that I do all of their marketing collaterals for. So they host a lot of different summits across Asia, and I edit and I do and I create all of their marketing materials for them to go out to those summits with. And then I have clients that I just do press for, digital and hard copy. And then I do, for certain clients, just influencer marketing. So it really ranges. But
Right.
um, with being in the digital age and where we are, it really is so unique. And you never have a boring day because it's always changing.
It's also hard to specialize. It's hard to kind of keep if you're that broad, it would be hard to keep current in so many different areas, I would think.
That's
That's
right.
where your team can maybe you have people on your team that specialize in different areas that might help that. But if you had to kind of say this is my ideal client, how would you describe that?
So what I pride myself on with Panda is we like to specialize in clients who anticipate the future. So not so much, specializing in a specific industry or targeting a
Hmm.
certain industry. I know there's a lot of PR firms who target lifestyle or blockchain and I like to say I like clients who are anticipating the future as opposed to blocking myself off from other industries because I said, well, I'm only going to do food and beverage, or I'm only going to do blockchain. I'm only going to do, whatever the case, mobile apps. I like to say that if you have a voice and if you have something that is going to better our future generations, then I want to work with you.
So, I mean, are you talking about social kind of those that are focused on social good, or are they social enterprises, or is it just ones that are really anticipating the changes that are coming societally, like tech changes and
Anything, tech, lifestyle. I mean, every and in any industry, you could benefit the future. So
right?
again, not targeting an industry as opposed to the message that
Sure.
your product or service is doing.
So in the last 18 months, what would you say would be that one moment you can look back and say that was the highest high right there. That was the time I was on the top of the mountain.
So I had a client who was being who ran into legal issues with a bigger corporation,
Hmm.
of which they were not associated with, and my client was pretty upset by this. And I took that and I created a story of, all right, well, let's create. This is now corporate bullying going after the little guys, and because of that, it became the domino effect. And as a publicist, you kind of have to take all the information you get from a client and create something that is is a story. And that's where the job is creative and
Yeah.
not a job, but it becomes creative. And so and no joke, after that, it was, the New York Times, page six. In that industry that I was working with, every huge art publication bit, and so after that, all that marketing and all that press only furthered their success. So and that was actually my first big client
Hmm.
at Panda, and because of that, not only was it a domino effect for their marketing and their exposure, but it was also for my company and where I went with my clients.
Right. I mean, I love the idea. I mean, I think to the commoner like myself, we kind of look at PR and marketing kind of interchangeably, but it
Mhm.
really is I mean, they're really unique. And I mean, I have a friend that's the PR director of the company I work at, and she always talks about, how do you capture the narrative, or how do you set the narrative of the story? How do you get ahead of it in essence instead of trying to catch up? And it looks like that's what you did with this story. Okay, we got a David and Goliath situation here. How do we frame this that in essence maximizes maybe we have less resources than the other party does, but how do we capture the story? How do we get the
Exactly.
story leaning in our direction? And I mean, love the fact that you recognize that angle, and I obviously your client did as well.
Yeah. No, it is you're addressing your client at the end of the day. You are taking because your client won't know. They have all the information. They built their but they have no idea, and that's why they're hiring you, whether you're a startup or, an established firm. They're hiring you because they don't know what journalists want. They don't know what especially with how fast we're moving in the digital
Right.
age, they don't know what the expectation is of what they've created. So they're relying on you to not only come up with the narrative, but they're relying on you to create what they have created and make it to the point of what they have dreamed of.
Hmm.
And that's where I am so passionate about the people who are anticipating the future because that narrative is easy to create.
Sure. So, if you had to kind of pinpoint, say, one or two pain points that you encounter on a pretty regular basis, I mean, other than the fact that the entrepreneurial roller coaster that you find yourself on, and every other startup finds themselves on. So, what would you say would be one or two pain points that maybe our listening audience could speak into to kind of, help kind of frame the narrative around, even your business?
So, um, so how I started for is the question, like how I,
Or what's really a pain point that you encounter on a regular basis that you say, this
oh,
is an obstacle we hit, or
yeah,
one or two obstacles we hit on a regular every day. It's a speed bump in the
yeah,
road. How do we overcome those?
no, absolutely. I mean, for example, being a startup is a huge obstacle. I mean, I'll just tell you with certain it's so strange though because sometimes I get clients who are franchises and they want the startups and they're like, we want you because you're hungry and you want to work and you're going to work for less. And
Right.
so we want you. And then you get these clients who are not your franchises, and it gets kind of confusing in that way because restaurant industry or mostly your lifestyle industry actually will kind of be gun shy in a way to take on a startup firm as opposed to one of the more established firms, and that can
Mm.
become really frustrating because we are as in fact if more capable of from the other established firms, but because you have the unfortunate negative connotation of being a startup in PR and marketing, which is the service industry, I think in product, being a startup is more exciting because
Sure.
that means, oh, you could go to Shark Tank. Oh, you could go on to CNBC's, show. I forget the name of it, but when you're a service industry and you're a startup, there's a little bit more of reluctance to work with you. And that's frustrating because, it's like you got to start somewhere
Right.
and you have to take a chance on a company that may be small but has the means
Hmm.
and has the experience and has the network and the resources to do better than your bigger firms who you could become just a number. And coming from the entertainment production side of representing actors, for example,
Hmm.
if were a developmental actor, you could sign with one of the big four top talent agencies, but you're a number
Sure.
and you're not actually being developed. You're
Right.
just, okay, you're sitting on a roster. And it's the same with PR and marketing is that, okay, you could sign with the Rogers and Cowan, but you could potentially be just a client sitting on that roster as opposed to being developed and being, actually prioritized. And I think at a startup, I deal with that all the time where sometimes I get clients that have the wrong idea
Hmm.
of what a startup actually means.
I love the way you just framed that. I mean, how you kind of juxtapose the product startup versus a service startup. I mean,
Hmm.
it is that is really interesting the way you frame that. I've we've done interviews virtually all year long, and I've never had anybody make that distinction, but it makes perfect sense. The way that you
Yeah.
frame that. So, what would you say would be another pain point other than kind of the overcoming the perception of being a startup or the how people perceive you as a startup? What would be another pain point that you encounter that maybe you or your team encounters on a fairly regular basis?
Um, I mean, I guess, the expectation of certain clients and, well, not client, but potential clients and their
Hmm.
expectation. I have actually, in my startup phase, have turned away certain clients because of the expectation. And, and of course I always do the proposal before signing them. And that's just a formality of kind of
Sure.
getting out everything on, in writing. But some clients have had these expectations that are beyond what they have created so far. And so I guess in it's a double standard, but you have on the one side, you want people to take a chance on you because you're the startup. And on the other hand, you want people to take a chance on you, but don't be, too big for your britches either, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. I guess it's like you want a startup, but also have something in order for a startup to take that and create something out of it. I've had people come to me and say they're internationally renowned and they're coming to us, and immediately a red flag goes off, and you're like, what, and then because you have to do your due diligence
Right.
as a firm before working with someone.
Right.
And you can't, even though I have to scale my business, I also don't want to take on clients for the sake of a retainer fee. I want to take on clients which is why I say I want them to be anticipating the future as opposed to just talking and blowing smoke. And sometimes there are potential clients who are coming to me with these pitches for me to take them on.
Mm-hmm.
And before you take them on that it's not realistic.
Right.
And so that's another problem I encounter, is that if I don't see something that can actually work with, I won't take it on. Sometimes I have taken it on, and in the first month I know it's not a fit, and I have said, no,
Yep.
we can't keep working together because there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or it's just not realistic.
Right. I mean, and I would think that would be a very difficult sell on your part to talk to a client that has an unrealistic expectation or maybe an unrealistic self-perception of who they
Right.
really are. You're going, no, you're not LeBron James here. Yeah, matter of fact, you're
But
5'4" and you're
right.
and
But what's great though is that in the first 2 seconds of talking to I mean, no, not two, but in the first minute of talking to someone if that is the case. So it's very easy to decipher who has realistic expectations and who actually is in need of PR and marketing.
yeah.
You know immediately.
That's probably because you probably have a really acute gift of intuition, though. I would think you really can. I mean, anybody that can recognize in the first 2 seconds that this client is realistic or not probably really can see into their soul too. So
I
it's a
mean, I would only hope that somebody who started their own business, if somebody came to you as a startup firm and said, I'm internationally renowned, I want you, that you go, red flag.
yes, exactly right. That's right. That's right. I looked on your Facebook profile. You are certainly not. Yeah, no,
Thank
not
you.
you. No, not you. I'm talking about the generic. Yeah, the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
generic you. That's right. I
Exactly.
looked up that
Ex-
client, and there's no way they are world renowned.
Yeah.
So,
That's it. You can't kid a kidder. It's just like PR and marketing is so specific. It's so researched that it's like if you're going to come to me with, a fake pitch and not what you actually are, then it's not going to work, because although a business, PR and marketing, to do marketing properly and authentically, it is so personal as
yeah,
a side to business. So if you do not connect, if you do not have that same page kind of, then it will not be effective.
it's what they say. If you always tell the truth, you never have to remember what you said. So I mean, what a
Right.
great line, and people can see through that as well with PR and marketing. We say, this is not a genuine, accurate story here either. So I mean, you
Exactly.
you have to kind of get in their head as well too, and actually become the client in some respect because you're
Oh
speaking on
yeah,
their behalf. So you
exactly.
really have to understand who you're working with. So let's kind of shift here a little bit and take a little bit of a deeper dive, just kind of get inside your head a bit. And so, if you had to say there's one person online that really inspires you, who would you kind of pinpoint and say this person I really look to for kind of long distance guidance and mentorship?
Well, I think being a former actress, I would have to say George Takei, because George Takei
Yep.
has beautifully transitioned from kind of, if you are the geek Czech Star Trek fan. If you're a Trekkie, like my family was,
Hmm.
you love George Takei, and he was Sulu on Star
Sure.
Trek, and he has beautifully transitioned to kind of this social media mogul, and he everything that he posts on Twitter, your celebrities and everyone, your Joe Schmoes are reposting it.
Yep.
And because everything that he has to say, much like Jim Carrey now,
Sure.
is so relevant and is so inspiring and well thought out. And I think a lot of people look to this Gary V on
Hmm.
Instagram,
Yep.
and I'll be honest with you, I can't stand him because I think that he contradicts himself and he is a hypocrite in many ways. But what I do respect is somebody who comes from a different industry and has transitioned into something completely different
Hmm.
and can speak to um, the broader picture coming from a specific industry like George Takei did.
Sure.
And he speaks so eloquently with whether it's politics, whatever it is, the
Hmm.
subject matter, everybody gets on board with what he's saying. And I think that's everything. So
And he had
I
he had kind of a silent, he had a kind of a large section of life that was kind of the silent years, between Star Trek and between the time, I guess, social media kind of reintroduced him to,
yeah.
a whole new generation. So if there was a particular life quote that you had to kind of point toward, is there a one line life quote or mantra or whatever that you have taped up on the wall somewhere and you try to refer to or maybe lead your team toward?
Yes. It's do what you love and get paid for it. And that's George Burns that
Hmm.
said that. So
Now that's a throwback. And yeah, next thing you know is you say, "I met him." There's no way you met him.
no, I unfortunately I did not, but another well put guy.
If you could go back and go back 18 months, 24 months, or whatever, kind of pre-startup, pre-Panda PR startup, what would be a word of advice that you would give yourself that you think, man, this would have saved me so much time and heartache and effort? Or is there one or two things that you would go back and say, I wish I knew this. I know it now, but I wish I knew it then.
Yeah, I think, it kind of ties into our, beginning of the conversation is everyone is so, what is the industry you're targeting?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you work with? And I think anybody who's starting any business, no matter what service that you're going into, and I can only speak from the service side, but don't be so quick to pigeonhole yourself into a certain industry.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, I would say to be open and to allow it to kind of figure itself out, as opposed to saying I'm lifestyle or whatever industry that even you are more drawn to is let it find itself. And because honestly, the things that the people and the clients that I have worked with, I would never have expected. So in that sense, I would say just be open and allow it to figure itself out.
So do you think your kind of your ideal client, if you have, I mean, if you've kind of evolved to that point, I mean, if you look back at your ideal client, does it kind of fit your personality? Does it kind of fit around, passions and interests that you have, or is it more, you're really just kind of stepping into opportunities?
I think that certain clients do, absolutely, but I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that some are opportunities.
Right.
I think it's kind of a toss-up, but for the most part, it's also, like I said, it's so personal. If I connect with the founder, if I connect and we're on the same page, like I'm working with a client now that is a mobile app company that I would never have thought I'd be working with,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the subject matter of the app. But because the founder and she and I see eye to eye, and she's also a female entrepreneur who's actually speaking in New York this weekend at the Female Entrepreneur Summit that's happening there. Had her and I not seen eye to eye, I wouldn't be working with her.
Hmm.
So it's so personal
Right.
that again, you have to be open and not pigeonhole yourself because of, this is where I see my company going.
Something sounds like the connection kind of led to the I mean the personal connection kind of led to the opportunity in that respect. I mean, you can
Yeah.
look back.
And I think all good business does. I think all
Right.
good business, it starts personal and it leads to, just representing actors. It's like if you didn't have that personal connection, then you didn't work as hard for that actor.
Hmm.
You didn't pitch them as
Right.
good as you would if you didn't care about that actor. And it's the same with a client in PR and marketing. If you don't care about what they're doing, if you don't care about where that person is coming from, then how can you pitch them?
Hmm.
How can you actually put them out there and shed good light on what they're doing?
Well, this is not a question that I had sent you earlier, so I'm kind of going to throw you a little bit of a curve here. So you'll bear with me, but I think you can handle it just fine. So if you let's do just almost a tiny micro class here on PR. So if the listeners that are out there, they've got they're kind of solo startups, they're sidepreneurs, they're side hustlers or freelancers or whatever. What would you say? Give them maybe three really salient points about how to do good PR. What does good PR look like for my business? What are say two or three things that hey you really got to figure this out to really
Okay.
be able to do PR well for yourself. And then tell us how we can get a hold of you.
So nobody can do it but me. No, I'm just kidding. So good
Step
PR
one,
and
look up Panda
marketing.
PR marketing. Yeah.
Step, so step one is to be OCD about spelling, grammar,
Oh yeah.
and who you are writing to, and how, I mean, from the client's name to the client's company name to, I mean, if you misspell the client's name, if you misspell, um, they're from there, you're from your,
Mm,
people, journalists are being inundated with press releases day to day. If you don't have spelling under control as opposed to grammar, forget it. So be so OCD and meticulous about your press releases. And then I would say emotional intelligence is the biggest, uh, you know,
mm,
asset to go into PR and marketing. So if you're going to go and you want to pursue PR and marketing, you have to, as they say, have the gift of gab. You have to know how to talk to people. You have to know, because like, and I keep saying it, but I'll say it again. It's, you have to know how to talk to people. And if you don't, then you've lost half the game,
sure.
and more than half, because honestly, the way I get clients, the way I have started, the clients who I am speaking to is all because I know how to talk to people. I know how to approach people. And in that becomes, how do you talk to journalists? So it's called public relations, it's called
For a reason. Yeah.
social media. I mean, all the channels that you're using to, create exposure for your clients are public, are out there. And in order to do that, you have to know how to talk to your audience.
Hmm.
You have to be relevant. You have to know what's happening. You have to watch the news. You have to be current on events.
Right.
If you have a client who is in certain industries, be up to date on what's happening in those industries, on what's happening in those areas of the world if you're global. Because if you don't, you're out in 2 seconds. So um, that kind of, watching the news, being OCD in your writing, and being extremely meticulous on like your writing and how you're talking to people. Because if you have and it's unfortunate because it's kind of that double standard. We are moving towards the digital age, which
Hmm.
is so important, your social media channels. But
Right.
at the same time, what wins is talking to people face to face,
Sure.
and that always wins out anything else, over email, over social media. It's the face to face, and if you can't get that, if you don't know how to talk to people, then I don't know what to tell you. That's the biggest. thing. And that's in every interview I had when I was in Los Angeles, when I was in New York before I ran my company. That is how I got every job. I used my Facebook as a LinkedIn. I still do.
Yeah.
And I message people, and it turns into either a phone call or a Skype or whatever, what have you. And after that conversation, I kid you not, that person becomes a client, or at least, it becomes an in-person meeting. And that's because of, that gift of gab. And if you
Hmm.
don't have that, that's hard to learn.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because using your Facebook kind of as your LinkedIn, as a LinkedIn substitute, because that's how I found you
Yeah,
was through Facebook. And so how did I do when I approached you? Did I spell all my words right?
you did. You did. But it's okay. I'm not your client, so you don't have to worry about that.
Man, I am so glad that I took that little detour to ask you that last question, because you just kind of came alive. I mean, not that you weren't already, but I mean, there was like you went to DEF CON 2 there for a second, and it was just it was a new
No,
level of. I felt like I'd uncorked the bottle there and really got to the good stuff right there
no,
at the
I'm very
very.
passionate about this.
Oh, I think it's
I
great.
love it. Yeah.
I think it's great. Well, so tell our listeners how they can find you, and what's the best way to get in touch with you.
So Instagram and Facebook, it's just Panda PR and Marketing, both. And we're on Twitter, but we don't use it so much. So Instagram and Facebook is the best way.
Well, Amanda, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Is there any closing thought that you want to kind of leave with our listeners, or how would you want to wrap this up? And as we're coming to the close of our chat here.
Anybody who's going to start their own business, which I'm only almost a year in, so I guess anybody who wants to, anybody who has an idea, again, product or service, don't be afraid to do it. And, our economy in the United States is the best it's ever been right now. So go for it, and don't be afraid to dive in, and don't take yourself too seriously. I think my mom has the best advice, which is if you want people to like you, listen and don't talk. So always listen, and don't think that you know it all, and because no one does, and I certainly don't. And you're always learning, and you're always going to learn from every experience. So that's it.
So good. Let's just wrap this up with the kind of. I love the statement. Just go for it. I mean, what a
Yeah.
way to. And I love the way that you kind of framed this today, and I know our listeners have really benefited from hearing you kind of outline your story, but also give us some real usable tips here at the near the end of the conversation here. And Amanda, thanks again for just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Have a great
No,
day.
thank you so much.
It's good to talk
Thanks
to
for
you.
having me on.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right. Bye, Kevin. Thank you.